Welcome to Yin Yoga Lifestyle. I am your host, Colette Darville. Cultivating our body's resilience and inner silence and its application to all aspects of your life. Let's become enlightened and enjoy the power of intuitiveness and creativity. You are listening to Society Bites Radio, social interaction for the mind and soul. Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I am your host, Colette Darville, and this is Yin Yoga Lifestyle. So now let us take a deep meditative breath. Inhale, so, and exhale, hum. For more than 20 years, Kristin Kanner has served as an assistant state attorney in the 17th Judicial Circuit and has led the office's Sexual Violent Predator Unit since 2004. Kristin has dedicated her career to public service. She joined the Broward State Attorney's Office in 1993 as a member of the Felony Trial Unit, where she prosecuted more than 100 felony cases. She was quickly promoted to senior supervising attorney in the misdemeanor trial unit, responsible for a team of 30 attorneys. She went on to serve in the domestic violence and sexual battery child abuse units. Kristin has spent the past 9 years in leading the sexually violent predator unit, prosecuting all civil commitment cases in Broward County, from filing to verdict. Kristin is a graduate of Duke University with degrees in psychology and political science. She received her Juris Doctorate from the University of Florida College of Law. She lives in South Florida with her husband, children, and very well-behaved dogs. Welcome to Yin Yoga Lifestyle, Kristin.
Thank you.
And I can say that because I know your dog, so.
yeah, I think that's generous, but I appreciate it anyway.
Kristin, thank you for being here today. I know you're very busy, but we're going to start as we always do in Yin Yoga Lifestyle in the podcast, always at the beginning. And were you always interested in becoming a lawyer, and what or who inspired your career choice?
Probably not always interested. I think I went to college with pre-med and go to medical school. And while I was in college, I decided I didn't really like spending all that time in the lab, and it looked really too hard and too boring. So I said, well, I can read and I can write, so I'm going to try and go to law school. And that's what I did. However, we did have some family acquaintances who were lawyers, and some of them, because I grew up outside of Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia, and some of them worked for various government agencies, including the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I think that's really what inspired me after I made the decision to go to law school, because I did not want to, at 21, go out and get a job. So I thought, well, 2 more years of school sounds like a good idea.
Well, you were obviously brilliant enough that you could do that, though, right?
I
mean,
I don't know
and
about
you're
that,
very
yes.
humble, too. You're very humble.
Well.
So you have served as the assistant state attorney in the 17th Judicial Circuit for more than 20 years and has led the office's Sexual Violent Predator Unit since 2004. What promoted your decision to join the Department of Children and Families?
In 2013, there was some, I'll say, turmoil at the Department of Children and Families. The Department of Children and Families runs the Sexually Violent Predator Program. So the program that I prosecuted the cases for, they actually ran the administrative part of the program, and they supervised the facility, which holds roughly 500 and almost 600 sex offenders in Arcadia.
Wow.
Well, the turmoil that was sort of surrounding the program in 2013 came to the attention of the legislature, and they were holding some committee meetings in November of 2013. No, actually earlier than that, September 2013. So my executive director at the state attorney's office had me go with her to Tallahassee, and I testified in front of a Senate, and a House panel regarding the program. The then Secretary of CF was at those hearings, and she called me the next week and asked me if I would be interested in taking over leadership of the program. And I thought about it for a few days. I talked to a few people, and I thought that this would be a really great opportunity to really affect change on a more global level in terms of sex offender policy, as opposed to only prosecuting the cases locally. So I decided to take the leap and went to work for the Department of Children and Families. And it was a great change. I've learned to do a million things. I love DCF. And I think that we have made some changes to the program that have been beneficial to the people of the state of Florida.
Oh, it's a huge job. It's a huge job, and change is slow, right?
Change is slow, and some days the job is bigger than other days.
Right.
It's more challenging than other days. The program is statewide. We are responsible for the evaluation of every person who's ever been charged with a sex offense in the state of Florida, who is currently serving a sentence in the Department of Corrections, the Department of Juvenile Justice, or a state mental health facility or a county jail. Mm. So we get referrals from all of those agencies, and we review the backgrounds of all of those people and determine if they need, if their behavior is being driven psychological diagnosis. So if they have some sort of sexually deviant reason why they're committing these crimes. So we're looking at people who are motivated by their diagnosis and who are a threat to commit more sex offenses if they're not confined for long-term treatment. So the treatment part, once we make a recommendation, then the state attorney's offices across the state actually do the judicial process and have jury trials to see if the person meets the criteria. And after that, if they do, they get sent to the treatment facility, which is in Arcadia, which we supervise the management of. And that's where currently, and I didn't actually look at the population today, but it's around 580 people are currently housed at the facility. And it's a really widely recognized as a top-tier treatment facility in North America for sex offenders. It's an innovative program, and it's a state-of-the-art treatment program and facility, and they have the opportunity to avail themselves of a really in-depth, long-term treatment program that's designed, obviously, to change their behavior. Right. And make them or allow them to hopefully be productive members of society.
Now, sometimes, things are not always black and white, are they? And and this is a question that I actually I asked a friend of mine who was going into law many, many years ago. And I thought, I'd pull that thing right out of the hat and just ask you, in your opinion, what is the most important, truth or justice?
Well, I think that truth is always paramount, and you hope that the truth leads to justice. But they're complementary, but not the same concept. But I think that truth is always what people in the law are seeking, and hope is the result. And, but it's an imperfect process. It's an imperfect system because there are human beings involved. So, there's no perfect human being. There's no perfect people in any given situation or perceive the truth differently.
Right.
So they may not be intentionally lying, but they don't have the same perception of what occurred as somebody else. Right. So you hope that you're seeking justice through the truth.
Right. Yeah. And that's, it's kind of a loaded question, really, and but I did have to ask you that. I felt compelled to ask you. Now, what are some of the more positive changes you have seen in the area of children and family law, and especially concerning children, because who sometimes don't have a voice and have decisions made for them?
It's true. I think that, like I said earlier, I love working for the Department of Children and Families. I've never been a part of an organization that, A, is so highly educated, And B, from a policy standpoint, you know, for the most part, you can say this about any profession. Nobody's trying to do a bad job. So for people are truly working toward positive solutions, and always at the front leading the process is the idea that we're trying to protect children, or trying to help families in crisis, or trying to protect the vulnerable in general. So I think some of the policy changes and the law changes that have been sought out have been in that vein, always trying to protect the vulnerable. With that, you know, the Department of Children and Families has a lot of allies in that, obviously, members of the legislature and different elected leaders who are able to affect that change. But being able to identify what needs to be done. For example, right now, the Secretary of DCF has made it a priority to look at sex abuse that occurs in the foster care system, in foster homes. And so he's assembled a statewide panel of experts who meet monthly to look at the whole issue and see where things could be shored up, what could be done differently. So there's constantly sort of a revamping and a re-examination of what is the best practice in order to protect the vulnerable in the state.
Yeah. And it's you know, children sometimes get left behind. I have done in the past, and this new sort of way of looking at our society and recognizing that, you know, children and more children actually are speaking up as well. You hear children all the time speaking up, which I'm always quite amazed at, because, you know, we were good kids. We were told to be quiet, and, you know, we could voice our opinions, but there was a time and a place. You know, and I wonder with that, is that because of, you know, the surgence of social media or that kind of influence? I'm just wondering what your take on the social media is, as far as, you know, children are, because you have kids too, so.
Yeah, you know, I think if you approach it with caution and with common, good thing for example, to get news, to see what's happening, it's a good way to communicate with people quickly. It does, as you know, comparison is the thief of joy. So unfortunately, you know, comparing your mundane life to somebody's Instagram life can lead to some negative consequences. I think if you approach that with some common sense and teach your child, and hopefully every parent is, you know, focused on their child's self-esteem, that's it doesn't affect them quite as much, that what's happening online isn't necessarily really what's happening. But I don't know. I don't. It became pretty popular after my children were a little tiny bit older, so they've ridden the wave of it, but it wasn't something that was influential to them in their younger years.
Yeah.
So I think I'd be concerned about bullying, you know, cyberbullying, and honestly, the law is slow to respond to some stuff like that. The law is very reactive and not necessarily proactive, so it's a little slow to respond to stuff like that and controlling it. And as soon as you go through the arduous process of changing a law, the technology has changed and you're on to something else.
Right.
You know, so it's a little bit hard to keep up in that regard. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
I mean, it's I'm just thinking about, you know, some of the cases of bullying and cyberbullying, and whichever, you know, I mean, that was a new trend that started, that parents were always trying to protect their kids, you know, from this, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and
then plus with all the negative attention, you have to look at that, because you see, for example, mass shootings that have occurred recently, and you wonder why we've had a spate of them, and they didn't seem to exist when we were kids. You have to look at what's changed and what's different, and you point to that and think, well, maybe it's that, you know, or maybe it is the 24/7 exposure to news, and it's stressful, and you know, and
it is stressful. Very stressful.
It is stressful to everyone, and maybe our society isn't really handling their mental health needs, or addressing them, or recognizing their mental health needs at the same time. So
Right.
So go back to your point that children seem to have a little bit more of a voice